Coming up next, the prosecutorial misconduct scandal that has set Miami-Dade County ablaze is spreading.
After nearly 6 years of being behind bars, Isaiah Desir and Alex Alexander became free minutes after their second-degree murder and drug charges were wiped out. Prosecutors were counting on the third co-defendant, Latravius Roll, to testify against his friends. Roll, who was facing up to life in prison for the same murder, accepted a deal and got 3 years in exchange for his testimony. But this week, defense attorneys obtained an email sent by a former prosecutor, which they say proves Roll was forced to lie and threatened with a longer prison sentence. Because of the email, state attorneys were forced to drop the murder case. Borschu says it was another example of misconduct done by Michael Van Zandt, a former top prosecutor who resigned after he was disqualified from a death penalty case last year.
So this is the continuing fallout of a historic misconduct scandal that has been plaguing the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, I would argue, for over 30 years, but this has just exploded in the last year. And now, since I believe November, these attorneys can correct me if I'm mistaken, there have been at least 3 people whose sentences were either drastically reduced or, in this case, were completely exonerated as a result of fuckery on the part of Catherine Fernandez-Rundle, the Miami-Dade State Attorney, our top cop. Some people know that job in other states as a district attorney or DA. We call it a state attorney here in Florida. And she has been our state attorney since Janet Reno left for the Bill Clinton administration as Attorney General, 92, 93? That's how long she has been the prosecutor, and that's how long this Injustice Department has been churning bodies of innocent people, and in some cases, by the way, perhaps guilty people, but people whose constitutional rights were violated. Because, spoiler alert, Paul, you can't frame a guilty person. Okay. You know, if law enforcement is violating constitutional rights, it's not okay, and people got to walk. And that does not make our community a safe place. When prosecutors are doing the wrong thing, whether it's to innocent people or guilty people, society kind of ceases to function properly.
But what does Miss Rundle get from, like, pardon my ignorance on this, I'm just like, what does she gain from having them released with her fuckery?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of what she gains, because what she has is consistent power for over 3 decades. And by the way, when you're a prosecutor, you have the power to deprive people of life, liberty, and property. You're more that's, I'd argue, more powerful than even the governor, arguably the president in some cases. Okay. I mean, you are the king or queen of the community in which your jurisdiction occurs. I think more to the point is that there are no consequences for this misconduct so far. And that's what's really troubling about it, is the total lack of accountability, particularly coming from the person who is supposed to be our top cop, who is supposed to be holding people accountable, who polices the police, who prosecutes the prosecutors in this case. And just for a little perspective on this, I want to show these 2 other cases that I was talking about.
Let's see.
In 2010, 15-year-old Sabrina O'Neill was gunned down. Taji Pearson was found guilty. Pearson got life in prison, but today that sentence was thrown out.
We could not confirm that it was turned over to the defense.
Prosecutors admitted some evidence was not given to Pearson's attorneys by the former prosecutor on the case, Michael Van Zandt.
Corey Smith, the leader of Liberty City's violent drug gang known as the John Does in the 1990s. Smith was sentenced to death for the murders of 2 people. But 2 decades later, the state will no longer pursue the death penalty.
If I call her and she refuses, then I will find a way to make her unavailable, and then I can read her whole testimony.
The senior prosecutor of the case, Michael Van Zandt, resigning in March over that damning jailhouse phone call to a convicted killer connected to the gang. A judge issuing a rare order earlier this year, removing prosecutors after misconduct, including manipulating witnesses and improperly withholding relevant records from the defense.
Criminal defense attorneys Michelle Borchu and Adam Goodman have been involved in at least 2 of those 3 cases that we've talked about so far. Guys, welcome to Because Miami. I say welcome back to Because Miami. I want to start flashback to the first case that we were talking about at the top of the show, which is just happened last week. Can you give us a little bit of background on that case? How long has it been going on? And what is this kind of bombshell email that seemed to suddenly pop up that changed the fates of your clients?
Thanks for having us. So what I've been on the case, it's a 2019 case. The defendants had been in custody since 2019. They did go to a bond hearing, which they were denied the right to release pending their trial, even though going through the testimony, it seemed as if they probably should have been released, but a judge denied them that opportunity. And I've been on the case since, I believe, 22, maybe 21. And Michelle just got on the case at the end of last year. We wanted to put together a good team on this case. We thought that would, two minds are better than one. And so as the case progressed, we were getting ready to proceed to trial. We thought it was a very weak case to begin with, independent of, I guess, the legal term you used is fuckery. That's the official legal term.
Pardon my Hebrew.
Yes, that's the official legal term, I think, that they teach in law school. And we were proceeding to trial as is with a co-defendant. Mr. Roll had taken a plea, I believe in 22. And as part of that plea, we were able to, do our public records request. And sometimes you get exactly what you want, and sometimes you stumble upon the correct, something that you didn't intend to get. And we were able to find an email from a prosecutor that basically spoke to Mr. Van Zandt, who I worked against and with when I was at the state attorney's office. And it was essentially along the lines of, we don't agree with what he's saying, with his sworn statements that he's provided to us. We know he wants to resolve the case. He needs to basically change his story to fit our theory of the case. Otherwise, he's going to be facing more jail time. All of a sudden, he changes his story.
Oh, how about that?
He comes to court. We do an evidentiary hearing maybe a week or two before trial, and he's now saying all of a sudden it's something totally different that was consistent with his prior sworn statements. And we did get lucky. Luck's often involved in some of these cases. Michelle had a request pending, and the request came in after we picked a jury, and it came to us, and we were lucky that, we had good prosecutors, because there are good prosecutors at the office too. Casey Hughes, Alejandra de la Fuente were on this case. They were not on it very long. And within a day, before we even started court the next day, she done the right thing and decided that this isn't a case that they could proceed on in good faith, which is very tough to do on any case, but especially when there's next of kin involved. And they went through their proper channels and they, dismissed the case.
Michelle, Adam says luck. I say raw talent. Because this is not your first rodeo in just the past few months. You've been on the show before. You talked about how the Corey Smith case, here's a man who was on death row, who because of prosecutorial misconduct is no longer on death row. And you, I guess, kind of saw that as the first domino to fall here. And it was your, I think, as I recall, kind of casual observing of that case just sitting in the gallery there where you're like, oh shit, like a light bulb went off in your head. Like, I got to start digging around because this is really, really bad here. And so what I want to ask, though, is that all roads seem to lead to Michael Van Zandt. It seems like the tree kind of rotted from him. But it appears to me in this case, I see that it's redacted in the video that we showed, but this email was not from Michael Van Zandt. This was from another prosecutor. So the bad apple spoils the batch here. So in this case, like, it seems like there is a culture of corruption in this state attorney's office, because this isn't like, I don't want to blame everything on Michael Van Zandt because it doesn't seem necessarily that he was the culprit or responsible for the misconduct in this particular case.
Chilled for 48 hours, poured into a frosted glass, swimming in ice for a lovely, lovely burn. Isn't that deliciously ironic?
Well, I would say that he had his hand in it. It goes to show how pervasive it is when you have a bad apple in an office, especially when that bad apple is put in a position to train incoming state attorneys, to train career state attorneys on what needs to be turned over, how you treat witnesses, how you take statements. and how you interact with the defense team. And here, the email was not directly from Michael Von Zomp. However, the prior state attorney that was handling the case said that she had consulted with him and reviewed the flip co-defendant's statement with him, and they collectively decided that it was not satisfactory. So that leads me to believe that he was obviously her supervisor or some type of mentor, and she went to him with a sworn statement that was under oath, and they decided that that statement doesn't fit their theory of the facts. It would not help them convict the two other co-defendants, and they gave him the opportunity to come in and make a new statement under oath. So one of them has to be a lie, right? If they're both under oath and they're different. And I would beg to say that the second one's probably the lie. And they moved forward with it. After that email was sent out, about 6 months later, he came in, gave a new sworn statement, and he was given credit time served and released from jail. So he gave them what they wanted, and it was something that put the pin in the casket, or the nail in the casket, to move forward with a case against the two other defendants.
So let me ask you, Adam, you could take this, and Michelle, you could certainly contribute here. What does this say about the culture in the office? I often say, because I for years I've been trying to figure out why there has not been an organized effort to get some new blood in that office. Again, we've had the same state attorney for over 3 decades, and I always find that the criminal defense bar is usually pretty supportive of Kathy Rundle every 4 years at election time. I know part of it is just sort of, I guess, force of habit or inertia, or you got to contribute to whatever campaign you can contribute to. Even though this is a nonpartisan position, no party or nobody has really put forth a kind of substantive challenge to her term after term and election cycle after election cycle. And I think that people kind of like how incompetent and corrupt the office is, because they know how to deal with it. They know how to beat them. And I find that we now have, after over 3 decades, multiple generations of lawyers in South Florida who have been trained not in the law or the Constitution, but in Kathy's law. And so it's one thing what you learn in law school, and then it's another thing when you go to practice and are admitted to the bar in criminal defense or criminal justice or in the prosecutor's office here in Dade County, and you discover, well, this ain't like them law school textbooks that I learned from. This is a totally different game and a totally different set of rules, and it's whatever Kathy and her lead prosecutors like Michael Von Zomp and the people that he trains to misbehave apparently in this way. So what does this say about the culture overall at the office? You've said there's good prosecutors. Of course there are. There's a lot of people who work there. But is there a problem? Is this a pattern or practice? Is this pervasive?
Sorry, the light in my office keeps automatically shutting off. We're trying to save the earth with the lights.
I thought you kept having ideas while I was
No, we're trying to save the earth since I'm not going to get into politics. It's an interesting thing because it's such a large office. I don't think people realize how big the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office is and how many attorneys there are, because there's not just the criminal aspect, but there's even the child support division, which when I work there, these are people you don't even know you work with them. They've been working there just as long as you. They could have been there 20 years. And I think what happens, and this is going to happen to any large office, probably in New York or any of these big cities, is that the offices are very large, so you have to delegate to a lot of people. And you have a lot of turnover because prosecutors, it's the same with the public defenders, are not paid a lot. Even Catherine Fernandez Rundle, doesn't make a lot of money. I think it's like low 200,000, which is
pobrecita. I left my
money.
violin in the car. I'll play later for her.
No, but it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot for what someone can make in private practice, and with these law school loans and your debt and the price of everything going up.
So she's here because she's a public servant then, Adam.
I can't say why she's still doing it, but she's doing it as public service, and a lot of people who might want to do the job don't want to take the pay cut. But having said that, when you have a large office, you have a big turnover. And when you have a big turnover, I often say, the cream rises and leaves. So a lot of people who are very good at that job will get an offer from someone else. And they either have kids in private school, or they're starting a family, or they have to pay off their debt. So they decide to leave. Some people stay and they love it, and they deal with the financial hardships, but some people can't. And I think when you start at that job, it's usually your first job. Now, there are some people who have worked at other jobs and have life experience, but generally speaking, your prosecutors are starting at around 25, 26, and they have no life experience, and they're getting supervised by attorneys who are 1 year ahead of them. And then once they are done, there are other supervisors, but there's so many courtrooms, they don't get to see how to train them because they're just basically managing the day to day. They then get to felonies eventually, and it's kind of the same thing. A lot of people don't some get great training and some get not so great training. And I think that all comes down at the end of the day with how the office overly operates, and people are afraid to, sometimes are afraid. And when you say the culture at the office, I've had, some attorneys that say there's, that work there that are no problems, and completely, I had a prosecutor call me last night who I didn't even really know her that well. And she's a higher up felony prosecutor. And she's like, I'm concerned working here because I don't like how I'm pressured to do certain things. I don't even really know her that well. I had to double check. Is she still a prosecutor? Like, I might have had one case with her. So I thought it was kind of interesting that she called me of all people. But, some people are concerned with it because they work there and they're trying to do the right thing. And so when you say at the beginning of the interview that there could be more powerful than like the president of the United States, yes, when you're 23 years old, 26 years old, and you control someone's future. So it's tough to make the right call because you just don't know. And, I think that's kind of the problem is people who work there, it is hurting the community because even if it's relegated to a few cases here or there, you're scaring away good prosecutors, you're scaring away good attorneys, and you're building a distrust in the community. So when you have people come in for jury duty and they see a case, they're going to be distrustful of prosecutors because they've seen it on the news that this happens and that happens. And so people who the state might have a really good case against are going to, be found not guilty, or they're not going to be able to proceed on a case.
I want to touch on this as well and kind of link it up to the case that we're talking about. When I came on the case late in the game and I was trying to figure out why this person changed their statement so drastically, I started asking people about the prosecutor that was on the case before the current prosecutors. And everyone said she is reasonable. She's a straight shooter. She goes by the law. So I thought, all right, well, there's probably nothing nefarious here. And when I got that email with her name on it and her being directed by Michael Von Zompt to do what was done on this case, that's what made me really realize the pervasiveness of it. And it doesn't matter how many good prosecutors you have in an office. If you have bad ones that are directing them, that are turning a blind eye, and that are at the top of the office, that are supervising and that are making the ultimate decisions at the end of the day. So obviously I have a little more a different approach to it. I think that the bad apple does spoil the bunch. And I've had a lot of conversations with the quote unquote good prosecutors that left the office that I can say were good, that I had a good relationship with. They did the right thing. And it is often, if it's not, I'm overworked and have too large of a caseload, I refuse to play those games anymore.
Michelle Borchu, Adam Goodman, criminal defense attorneys. If you get in trouble in Miami, you know who to call. Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.